Boom. All right, I just went live. We're live. Live with John Harvey. How's
Yeah.
it going, man?
How's it going, brother?
It's going
Appreciate you
good.
having me on here, my man.
Yeah, no problem. I had a good time chatting with you last time, and this book legitimately looks amazing. Um, Black Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Volume 2. I want the chat to take note that it's only 5 hours left, 98 backers. We call it the Narwhal Nuge
Let's get the
if we get
nuge.
if we get any boosts from it. So sorry, I had a quick echo there because I have it open on YouTube too.
Okay,
That
yeah.
lets you know the delay. Like, okay, it's about 5 seconds delay. That's like if I look at the chat and I say, chat, press M in the chat for something. You wait. You won't see an M right away. It takes like 5 to 10 seconds, and then it goes live. Then they see it. They press it. It comes back to you.
Gotcha.
But you and me, it's much more like immediate. Like it's almost like talking on the phone. But the chat is not. It's like a big delay. That's actually there's funny
That's a
things
trip.
that come from that. Like if you're, I don't know if it's like if you're trying to think of something, and you're like, oh, what was that one movie? And then you're like, oh, I know. And you say this, and then the chat will be like, hey, I was the one who reminded you. Shout me
Right.
out, and you're like, no, you weren't.
You're
But
like, actually, no, I figured that out. But
yeah, it's like they typed it way before you ever said it, but it didn't show up on your chat before they typed it or whatever. So
Yeah.
many wars were started that way. Richard Lusaurus is M. Yeah. Yeah. What do people even push M in the chat for? I don't even know what that's for. What does it mean?
What does the M mean, people?
Yeah. So the first thing is just letting people know Black Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's last night. It's a great book, martial arts style book with comic style, just tons of awesome, like mixing together of fighting styles and characters and types of action. You got the Rini cover here, which is already iconic.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, do you want to give a quick pitch for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for those of you that love martial arts, that love comics, that love superheroes, you're going to get all that in here. It's the story of Jin Fong, and she is she actually becomes the third generation of Black Tiger in her family. The first female Black Tiger, probably not ever, but the first female Black Tiger in quite a while. And she kind of finds out the hard way. So as you're discovering the powers of the Black Tiger, she's discovering them. And her father is murdered. So she is, like any good martial arts movie, she's on a quest for to avenge her father and also to restore his name, because the name of the Black Tiger was run through the mud, but so was the family name. He was a captain in the Los Santos Police Department. He was posthumously dishonored. So she's on a quest to bring honor back to the family name, bring honor back to the Black Tiger, and there's a lot of martial arts to get there.
Cool. You know what that made me think too, that I like a lot, is like if the goal, and even if it's like within martial arts, this is even like a cool thing, but like honor being like a big deal is really fun. And that's a fun,
Yeah.
I feel for some people can like relate to it. It's more than like, I gotta avenge like my puppy, like John Wick style, like they killed my dog. No,
They
it's
killed my
really
dog.
bad. Yeah, like that's fine, but that's like so easy, like one-to-one math of like, oh yeah, a puppy got killed, you want to avenge it. But honor is like more relatable because it's more kind of weird and it's not as intense. That almost makes it more relatable because it's not crazy.
Yeah.
Because nobody has had like their puppy get murdered by the mob, so then they have to go get revenge. But everyone has had their honor besmirched, even if it's in
Exactly.
like science class or whatever. In your science lab, someone else takes credit when you did the work or whatever, and you get chastised, and you're like, my good name, sir, please,
Yeah.
it must be restored.
Everybody's
Like
felt that. Like you got in trouble for something that somebody else did, or something, you're like, no.
Yeah. So I like trying to find those things where it gets a step away from like, oh, this guy got killed, so now I got to get revenge. And it's more towards like, yeah, honor or like whatever. So another one that sometimes they're like just more simple and primal, but some of them too are like just protecting the weak. A lot of these they go with westerns really well, and they go with martial arts style stories really well, where it's
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to protect this weak person, no quid pro quo, no reason, no plot device, nothing. I just feel like protecting them. That's like kind of a cool one too sometimes.
But that's a super cool one, and that was the fuel for so many of the heroes that I grew up with. And I
Yeah.
guess, I guess a lot of heroes, at least with the big two, they've totally gotten away from that. But the fact, I mean, that was the whole, with great power comes great responsibility. It wasn't a matter. I mean, there was, like you said, there was no quid pro quo. It was just, you got this power and you got to protect folks that are weaker than you.
Yeah.
That totally appeals to me as a hero, because like that's the minority of folks. Like most people would just use their power for themselves. So you're like, okay, so we got the guy or gal who's the right person, to wield this power. They're not going to just do it for their own benefit, but they are going to help the weak.
Yeah. It is cool when you mention it, and it is like rare, harder to find. Yeah, the modern stuff, they're not really doing that kind of stuff these days. And another thing that happens is when the audience knows the character is like that, we can kind of begin to trust them, and you kind of like them even more. I think that's part of why people love One Piece and love, is it Luffy? Is it the main guy?
Luffy.
Yeah, because Luffy's very much like, he's like, how he's going to react to everything, because he almost like lives by principles that are like kind of simple, but real like hard work and do the right thing kind of stuff. But
exactly,
because he's so like tried and true set in that, it's kind of similar to like a total flip side would be like Hank Hill, but for like comedy reasons. Like he's so predictable. But what we just love we just like Hank Hill, like it's like one of his principles is his lawn has to be very well manicured.
Yes.
And like if the neighbor's dog craps on his lawn, we're all like, oh my God, Hank Hill is gonna be so pissed.
Exactly.
Yeah, but there's the hero version of that. And it's a funny, like, I don't know, it's like a contradiction almost, because you think predictability is not good. We love to be surprised, but there's these cases where the predictability can be really nice with characters, where you like you start to trust them and know them, and you know how they're going to react and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why, like, as much as I love Henry Cavill, I mean, he looks so much like Superman. There are things that they wrote in the stories that just didn't resonate with me. I mean, it's like Superman 2, when Superman ran away from the fight because people in Metropolis would die. People are like, Superman, where are you going? He's like, no, he's doing that for your benefit, because he knows if he continues to have that fight there, that people are going, that's Superman. He doesn't care how he looks. You know what I mean? I mean, he defeated them in private, so people are like, oh, Superman ran away. You know what I mean? But like in the story they did with Henry Cavill, you've got probably a writer or director say, wouldn't it be cool if Superman just had this massively destructive fight and all of Metropolis got destroyed in the fight and hundreds of thousands of people died in the process? That's not Superman. Superman would never do that. Yeah, that's the whole point. So I was just like, who is this guy? I was like, this guy's scary. I'm like, he's gonna have this fight, and hundreds of thousands of people are gonna die while he's fighting these guys, because he's gotta pound his chest and and just like, I'm gonna make my stand here. No, man, go to the Fortress of Solitude. We already know this is supposed to work.
Yeah, that's funny. It's like funny too, because it's so simple, but it's still a blind spot for like Zack Snyder, all those guys. They didn't think of it. But you're like, hey, first off, Superman 2 already kind of addressed this, but second off, Superman, he's not like a crazy hard. This actually, we can talk about this as a little side thing. So I'm not a Superman expert, and I imagine like if I don't know, somehow like got hired to do Superman, I would be terrified, because I actually wouldn't really know how to go about it. But I would at least be like, all right, I know I'm not going to do it Zack Snyder style. I'm just going to try. I am going to try and just make him like an actual hero. I know one thing about Superman is I know how they used to structure the short stories for the animation, and it's almost like it's almost like set up kind of like a joke, but it's the way that a Superman story would be structured is like the problem is kind of like the trolley problem. Like he has a train that is gonna run and it's gonna kill a bunch of boys that are tied to the tracks or whatever, and he
Yep.
has enough time to save the boys, but then the train's gonna crash, or he can save the train, but then it'll hit the boys or whatever.
Right.
And then somehow, because he's Superman, he figures out a way to save everyone.
To do both, yeah.
And that the audience can't see coming. And you're like, oh, nice. He like pulled it off with some kind of clever, like he tied the bridge in a knot and that made the train like something. And I'm like, that's all like super kind of fun stuff, actually. But yeah, like he's kind of simple. He's kind of like Luffy almost, like some of those kind of characters. And then it is just that they stick to their guns is part of the fun. And you see moments where like the simpleness plays out pretty awesome. Like the Superman best of moments that get retweeted. Like there's one where he kind of like, he like randomly talks to a kid who's about to like thinking about suicide. He's like on a building and Superman just like talks him down a little bit and then goes and does something else. I'm like, that's kind of epic.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What about, I guess
I think Superman, I think the key to writing Superman, honestly, is that Superman is like the best of humanity. So you're like, the reason why so many of Superman's adventures last so long is because he's always trying to do the right thing at the lowest impact. It's like he can end so many of these things so quickly, but he doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? He's like, he's trying to make sure it's not impactful to others, so he'll take some shots and whatever. So I mean, it's like, to me, that's Superman. You know what I mean? It's like he's not a warrior. He's got this great power, but he's very reserved with it, and he's very much like. And that's one of the things. If you ever watched the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, if you haven't watched all 4 seasons, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, because if you haven't watched it, you will have so much fun with Superman's final battle in there.
Okay.
Because
cool.
I'm not even going to tell you, just watch it and you'll see Superman. Because sometimes you're like, why doesn't he just do X, Y, and Z? So then finally at the end, he battles Darkseid. He's like, I'm unleashing. He's like, this is the first time ever, I'm going all out. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, it's cool. It's funny because like I meet a lot of people who they're like, I don't like Superman. And I almost can kind of relate to people who say that, but I do like him and I want to like him. But I'm like, what is the stuff? Because if you're like, okay, he's like OP is like what you might think. So he's faster than the Flash or just about as fast. And then you take someone who's strong, Superman's just as strong. Someone who's smart, he's just as smart. He's like all the superpowers combined. And then so you're like, well, isn't that like boring? And you're like, well, it's just kind of a challenge to write, but it's not boring if you do it right. It's like it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That
folks should read Man of Steel.
Oh yeah.
By John Byrne.
Have you read or seen One Piece Man?
One Piece?
Or sorry, One Punch Man.
One Punch Man. You know what? I've heard about that. I haven't watched One Punch. I heard he's super OP.
Yeah, that's all
I haven't watched him yet.
It's kind of a story about a guy who's OP, so that's the joke. And that's the thing. Superman inspires a million, like, what are they called? They're like reactions or whatever, where they're postmodern, where they're like evil Superman. Like The Boys is like that, and so many. Which is actually
Watchmen,
kind of
right?
Yeah. And that's another thing that kind of makes Superman cool is like so many people react to him and try to be like, wouldn't it be cool if he was actually like a badass though? And you're like, yeah, but the real Superman is like so legit. Like he's so iconic.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, everyone that tried to riff off of him, they made him like more of a jerk or whatever. I remember, back in the day, was it Rob Liefeld? There was one called Supreme from Image.
Yeah.
And like, I picked it up because it's like, this is cool. This is Supreme. But you're like, this guy's such a jerk, man. You're like, it's like, you realize it's like, you don't want that in a Superman type character.
Yeah, it makes you just like Superman even more. But even like One Punch Man, it's interesting because I feel like that is like owes a lot to Superman, even though I haven't read it too much, but it just feels like the super powerful guy because Superman kind of owns that. But yeah, I think some of that is like postmodern in a different direction where I don't know if he's
Mm.
an asshole, but he's like bored is part of it. He's like, I beat everyone so easy. I just don't know
Yeah.
what to do. And I'm like, that is kind of funny because it's a different direction, but all
Yeah.
this stuff kind of stems from Superman. But I wonder. So Mark Miller says he wants to come back to DC next year, I think, and do a Superman story. He's kind of been hyping it up a little bit, but I don't
Okay.
know how that aligns up with. It might be that his Netflix contract kind of wraps up, and then he does goes back to comics for a little bit. I'm not
Okay.
sure if that has anything to do with it, but part of what's been in the news is Mark Miller posed this idea that one second posed this idea that to rejuvenate the industry, you could offer 50%
Royalties.
royalties. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was kind of a cool idea, but it's funny. There's lots of reactions. For some reason, the SJWs hate it, kind of because they just hate Mark Miller. And even though it's like a great, all he's trying to do is get them more money.
Yeah.
And your boy Zach did a great video on it. But then I did notice too, a lot of the CG crowd weren't too into it either because, and I saw some okay takes. They were like, it actually just won't work. A lot of them were saying like, yeah, that's cool if you're trying to get people more money. But the main one, it was Arvid Nelson said, he's like, it's not really a money problem. That's like kind of downstream. The main problem is ideology. And it's kind of that for example, I feel like Marvel and DC, they won't hire certain people. And
Yeah.
this is a problem your boys acted another video on where it's kind of interesting. We're in a place right now where Heather Antos works at IDW. She's been kind of failing upwards. And now she's at IDW. She was at Marvel, but
Mm-hmm.
Marvel won't hire someone that they know Heather Antos hates, like, which is super kind of interesting, but it's more of like this social club that kind of needs to break to stop.
Yeah.
And then Sean Gordon Murphy and Perch were talking, and they were saying that this social club that's kind of comics has become, that's one huge incentive for them to not have it be saved, is because they have all the power when it's kind of more of a social club than actual companies. Like companies should be competing. Like it's kind of weird. Like Marvel should be hiring people that Heather Antos hates. And it's weird
Absolutely.
that and it's weird that there isn't a company yet that would be like, oh shit, there's a bunch of untapped people that the mainstream won't even look at their art because of ideological reasons. Well, let's see what's there, because that could be a competitive advantage if they refuse to do that. It definitely feels like it's kind of like ripe for the picking or whatever. That will definitely
Yeah.
happen like sooner or later in the next like 2 or 3 years, even like not even like too long from now, I think. But I think one thing, I don't know if like even you or me, like say, I don't even know if I would, or and you can, I'll ask you this question too, but like a
Mm-hmm.
hypothetical, but like even if it's like say a kind of big IP, like for me, like maybe like X-Men, like I kind of grew up on X-Men. I feel like I could maybe write it.
Yeah.
But so say Marvel was like, Narwhal, would you try to rejuvenate X-Men? And I would almost be like, no, I'm doing other shit. I got my own shit going on. I mean, maybe if they paid a ton or whatever, I don't know. But what about you? Like, is there any offers? Because that's something that could be on the table. Like a lot of these talented people, like you and me, basically. But it's like a lot of people in CG. We the one way the mainstream could rejuvenate itself is just by quit ignoring us. I think is like part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, because I've been and I've honestly I've landed on both sides. There's a part of me that just ideologically is just like, you know what, what these guys doing, what they're doing sucks. Last thing I want to do is find myself being, edited down, so that anything that I was providing, would fall in line with the ideology that they're a part of, because I that's not how I want to be represented. There's a part of me that's like, man, these are characters that I've loved from youth, and to have the opportunity to rejuvenate them and to write them the right way, it's appealing, But the other thing,
Yeah.
then I go back on the other side of the fence and I say, one of the, like, think about the beauty of all the different stories that you've created. That's your IP,
Yeah.
So if something does happen with that in the future, you are going to get duly compensated, and I'm sure that there's some kind of agreements they put in place, but it's like, man, I'm just, I don't want to give away ideas.
Yeah, it's a funny path because in the past, it's like writers get their start in the mainstream and then they kind of branch out, start doing their own IPs, and then whatever success. That's like Mark Miller did that. A ton of creators kind of do that. Is like you kind of make your name in the mainstream, then expand into doing your own IPs. If anything, we're doing it in reverse. Like the mainstream ignored us. The timing is weird, so they locked us out or whatever.
Yep.
And then, so we're doing our own IPs kind of because we have to, but we're doing them with not a crazy huge audience. We skipped that part where you're supposed to build like a huge following.
Right.
But we're building an infrastructure to be able to do that without the mainstream completely and cutting them out completely, which is kind of cool. It gives us some leverage, but that will take some time.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's this option like, oh, we could work backwards. We could, instead of doing IPs, like maybe it would give a boost to your clout and credibility and audience. Like if you wrote Superman or if I wrote X-Men or something.
It sounds terrible. That'll be the primary reason why I want to do it at this point. To have the opportunity for folks to say like, man, he does do good stuff. Well, then, that's a pathway, that's a road to the independent work, the self-published work.
Yeah.
So I do think about that as well. It's like, it's a pathway potentially.
Yeah. You can go there for a little bit, build it up, come back. What about even like if the problem is the mainstream industry kind of as it is, it's like pretty much literally dead. So then it is kind of a fun idea to be like, oh, I get to be on the team to try and save it. So like say for this hypothetical, you're on Superman, I'm on X-Men. So we're actually competitors in that case too.
Yeah.
But then so if it's for Superman, it's like, would you just be like, okay, we need to go back to basics and just do like a classic Superman story? Or would you kind of be like, all right, I really got to think of like, it has to break new ground, because that's part of what got them into trouble in the first place. But then also it could be boring if you don't break ground a little bit. Like, do you struggle with that at all in this like hypothetical scenario? Or?
I would go back to basics. To me, the thing that makes Superman is his ideology. And it's like you can still do a lot of cool things within the confines of the character that he is. And it's part of the reason why a rogues gallery is important. Because the rogues gallery brings a lot of different elements to the story. You're like, yeah, maybe Superman just by himself, maybe that could get boring. But it's like, if you have a Lex Luthor in there, you have characters like the Parasite, you have all these other different kinds of characters with all these different motives and, their own angst and their own, the things that are driving them. I think it could make for actually a lot of fun, because the reality of the matter is, and this is one of the things I really enjoy about the Flash, and that, and I keep talking about that Justice League cartoon. The Flash they did it so well because the reality of the matter is, Flash is, and this was done well because Flash, that version of a Flash was a little bit goofy, a little bit campy, but absolutely fun. And his rogue gallery actually don't hate him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, he's kind of like, here, let me get you back to the Institute. Let me get you your meds. And they're like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? So it's like, the whole rapport is really what does it. And honestly, that was one of the reasons why I enjoyed killing Joke for Batman, was the rapport that Batman and Joker had, as twisted as it was, you kind of realize that Joker does all of this terrible crap, but he actually wants Batman around in his
Yeah,
own twisted, jacked up way. Like, he'll do all kinds of stuff to folks around Batman, but he wants Batman around.
yeah, yeah. He kind of does it as a calling card just to get to talk to Batman or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, you're like, this is the craziest way to get somebody's attention.
Yeah, that's funny. I love that when that's a way you can like unlock. It's not even like their characters. At that point, it's their relationship, because people can be different people around different people. So yeah, like
Yeah.
Batman and Joker, they kind of bring out the worst in each other. Or Joker wishes he brings out the worst in Batman.
Yeah.
He wants to.
He wants to so badly.
Yeah.
He wants to make Batman break his code.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
And again, it's like, it's cool how simple that is, but it is like you're saying, it's kind of like almost infinite stories.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this on a previous stream, but what you're talking about with the Rogues Gallery, that's a great point. And this idea that these characters, for one, they need to be able to be written by multiple writers is like an interesting kind of fact. And then the other thing is, like, if there are going to be many stories over the years, like thousands or a million, they can't actually be the ones like learning the lessons. Like Superman, he can't really be learning a lesson every story, because then at that point he's just like a wishy-washy like kid or whatever. No, he's a man who knows exactly what he believes.
That's
so he's not really he's the one people are like bouncing off of. He's like a rock,
Exactly.
And yeah, so you're bringing those people in. You're bringing in the Rogues Gallery, or like even like X-Files might kind of do that, or like old TV shows where, yeah, Mulder and Scully, maybe their relationship will evolve over the years and they have this romance arc or whatever, but they're pretty much the same every single episode. They're not really changing. But then like the monster of the week or the character, the stories that they stumble into, that will have like an arc, or the character will, a guest character will have an arc or whatever.
And that's what enables you actually to jump into those stories at any point. You can watch an episode of the X-Files and have a blast, even if you don't know anything about the X-Files. And it's that's how comics were back in the day. I think when I became a self-proclaimed collector of comics, it was off of Avengers like 184.
Yeah.
Because all the books always gave you a jumping on point, and they gave you a story, and they gave you the button at the end. So they gave you, so like, yeah, and there were other important things that had happened, but those things didn't detract from you being able to enjoy that story. And if you wanted to, being the nerd that I was, then I'd start going to back bins and finding things. Oh, this is the issue they were talking about where, Hank Pym did this thing, or, but it didn't detract from what I'd already learned. It wasn't like, okay, man, I picked up at 184 and I have no idea what's going on. I can't even, I need to get 183 issues of book before I can understand where I'm at here.
Yeah, actually, yeah. The episodic that it enables and the ability to jump on, that is awesome. Peter Samedi talks about that too, and he's doing it right now with.
He does that.
Yeah, with
King Cryptid. Yeah.
But back really quick to like the relationship stuff, and you mentioned Lex Luthor. I was like, damn, you're right, and I was like, he's actually a great character too, and it's cool that like. And many in like the Superman kind of Rogue Gallery are, and with Batman, like Joker is kind of the main one you think of. But I was trying to think of like, what's if that Joker and Batman dynamic is kind of so simple. I'm like, what's the Superman Lex Luthor kind of thing? I was like, well, you know what it almost is like? It's like Lex Luthor, he wouldn't even be a bad guy except the fact that Superman exists. It kind of makes him resent Superman, because Superman is so much better than him. That it's almost by relativity, he kind of like feels like a bad guy, but it's mostly like resenting Superman. Otherwise, if he would actually be a good guy. But
it's funny. But it's kind of funny, right? Because you're like, but for Superman, I kind of think about it like back in the day, like when I would watch like tennis or I would watch basketball, you're like, man, I remember because like Chris Everett Lloyd and Martina Navratilova had this big rivalry, and Martina was just a beast. I was like, can you imagine the records that Chris Everett Lloyd would have had if Martina Navratilova didn't exist at that epoch? Or can you imagine if Michael Jordan hadn't existed in that epoch? There's so many dudes that never got a ring that would have at least gotten a ring. You're like, just that one person, like their existence in that time period, just like for some folks screwed everything up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
kind of like, that's kind of how it is for Lex Luthor. I mean, Lex Luthor he's super smart. He's super rich. He's got everything. Then all of a sudden, this alien who's, he's the man of tomorrow. He's super smart. He's fast as light. He's stronger than anything on the planet. Then all of a sudden, Luthor's just like, what? I'm playing second fiddle to this alien?
Yeah. I know, yeah. It is funny. Like you could almost like do it would be like a gimmicky story, but what Lex would have been if Superman never came, he would actually be like the best guy ever or whatever. But
right.
Because Superman came, he's like, it kind of sets him down this path to be like, shit, maybe I don't like that guy. He's got like the confirmation bias against Superman. So if that ever comes up, he's like, why are we trusting this alien? The alien could destroy us all. Like we shouldn't really be like, trusting it so much to help us.
Exactly. But to me, that's what makes it fun. I mean, when you think about it, all these characters, like, I mean, Spider-Man was always one of my favorites, and he's got a great rogues gallery. I mean, it's like, yeah, you have Peter Parker, but whether you're dealing with the Green Goblin or the Vulture or Sandman, or then subsequently they added Venom and Carnage, and you're like, man, he's just got a great rogues gallery. And the same thing with Batman, but you also see how their rogues galleries kind of like feed into them. You know what I mean? It's like Superman's rogues gallery versus Batman's rogues gallery. Batman's rogues gallery are basically all nuts.
Yeah.
Because Batman just toes that line.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, they don't go to prison; they go to the mental asylum.
They go to the mental asylum. All of his guys.
Yeah.
They all go to Arkham because they're all nuts.
That's cool. Like, how did they plan that from the beginning? I guess it kind of comes up naturally, and it's like they kind of know maybe the themes they're playing with early. But yeah, it'd be curious to see like what the original Batman. I know he changes over time, but like at some point, yeah, it kind of coalesces into this thing you're pointing out that it's Batman who's like almost crazy, but not quite. He just doesn't quite cross the line. And then a bunch of people who do cross the line.
Exactly. And that's why he's best fit to be able to bring those folks back.
Yeah. He can kind of relate to them or whatever.
Exactly.
I read a kind of cool manga that was of Batman, and I think there's examples of that here and there, but randomly, like, I don't even know who did it. It's nobody super famous, but randomly manga artists, they'll like to take a crack at Batman, I think, over the years. Mm-hmm. And I read one, I remember what the guy said though in the interview in the back, and he said like he had a specific idea what kind of who Batman was. Yeah. And it was kind of like, I don't know, I did like it. And I'm like, is that really what he is? I think I'm like, maybe, but he kind of had it where, yeah, the bad guys are crazy and Batman is like, kind of like he's still a hero. Like people, sometimes they make him too much of an anti-hero almost, or, like it's like, he actually is a hero. Like he is trying, he will, if part of what the enemy requires is like almost like a therapy session while they're fighting and a little empathy or whatever, it's like Batman can actually like kind of give that to them too.
Yeah. So he's like a therapist and a hero.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember how that even played out. It was something like Batman was like, they had rigged it where like, kind of like if he hits them once, then they die. They like wanted a death by cop thing, but they wanted Batman to kill him. And he was like taking a huge beating just so he could talk to them a little bit longer or whatever.
Yeah.
and talk him down kind of. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet. Like it is
Yeah.
like a heroic thing, and it is cool, and Batman's capable of that too, or whatever.
Exactly. But it's
But
kind
yeah,
of
that's the
interesting.
I know, yeah, getting to the bottom of this, because actually in this like hypothetical, like say, yeah, like Marvel or whatever is like, right, Batman, X-Men, or Superman. The first thing I would want to do is like talk to some people. Like I'd want to call you on the phone and be like, shit, like make sure I'm even like approaching the character right. And because it is like just a recentering, back to basics, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then even remembering like kind of what we've been pointing out that I like. Because by the way, we got 9 people watching. People are coming in a little bit. We're in the middle of a pretty good conversation talking about like how to hypothetically write these iconic characters like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, even X-Men could be in there. But and it's the last night of 30 night 30 days for Black Tiger, which
That's
and it's
right.
at 98. And I'm like, we don't quite have enough viewers for me to like risk updating it. But I'm hoping if you're watching and haven't backed it, this is a perfect time to back. It's the last, few hours. Rainy cover. This is a long book, pretty long book too. How many pages is this one?
This volume is 88 pages, but if you're new to Black Tiger, you can get almost 350 pages worth of
Yeah.
books.
And it's all drawn by Rod Looper, right?
Rod Super Looper.
Yeah. No, I kind of forgot that that's a fact, but just the fact that you're working with one artist for 350 pages, that is never happens in the mainstream anymore. That's like a great kind of selling point that people should just hop on. And everything we're talking about loosely kind of relates to Black Tiger. In one respect, it's just fun to hear John kind of talk about these characters that he knows obviously so well and has a passion for it. And then like it definitely just bleeds through. And you're like, well, someone like that applying their skills and craft to their own story, and then you get Black Tiger. So like it's definitely worth checking out,
I
everyone.
appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Yeah, we might pivot and talk Black Tiger a bit in a second, but we're kind of on a roll here. I was thinking some stuff, just some curious. Oh, what one? Yeah, so if if I wrote a Superman story, I'm a little more even comfortable now, even just talking to you. Like I think I know what I could do, or even for like maybe for X-Men, it's a little different for X-Men, but for uh Batman, it's like this. But I would definitely do the thing where it's almost like another story, but then your iconic character comes in. Actually,
Mhm.
Superman's like the most challenging or the most like uh exact version of this. So, but actually, Mad Max is a little bit like this too, where the
Mm.
story is never about Mad Max. It's Mad Max stumbles into the story,
Right.
and then the story kind of changes because of him, but it's not about him. And
Right.
like that's kind of like the way I would want to write a Superman story, because I would be scared to make it about Superman. But if you just
Yeah.
make it like Superman is like involved in like a story that's already progressing, and if you can do it where sometimes actually, oh yeah, here's something, examples where the characters are OP. It is interesting, like because that they say about some of the SJW stuff, they call it a Mary Sue, like the girl
Mhm.
from the new Star Wars movies. It's like, yeah, it's boring because she can always beat everyone. And I think
Right.
they even will make that argument. They're like, well, Superman can always beat everyone. We're like, yeah, well, you write him in a very specific way. But like, it's interesting because like that's a okay debate. Like that's a fair point. But
Yeah.
in the end, it's like, yeah, Superman's an amazing character and she's a Mary Sue. So a little bit, it's hard to even parse like what the difference is. But what a huge part of what it is, where was I going with this? It's that for if you got a OP guy, oh, Star Trek, the original series of Star Trek. Have you seen many of those or familiar with that
Yes.
series?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, they're OP. Like they got all the technology. They can do everything. They can teleport people around. They can like create food if they want. But for one thing, they have their law. Like you can't do that because it would mess with the development of the civilizations or whatever.
Right.
And then the other thing that they have that's awesome is that they have like this, they're kind of represented by three people mainly, the original series, but it's Captain Kirk, and then Bones, and then
Spock.
Spock.
Yeah.
And between those three, kind of represent the over OP. They almost like Superman is like all three of them maybe. But part of the great fun of how they do it is they all want the same thing. They're all trying to do the same thing, but they all think of different ways to do it. So they're kind of
Right.
arguing, but they're arguing like they're on the same. Actually that's a little bit of a thing I see sometimes with either modern Marvel where it's kind of bad, or even modern Netflix, is almost like a misinterpretation of when they think like every scene needs conflict. And then a
Right.
lot of times it'll be like people yelling at each other, like talking crap or whatever, even
Yeah.
if it's two good guys and they're just like arguing, being mad at each other almost for like no reason, but like the writer just thinking like, oh, we need some conflict to spice this up.
Right.
And I'm like, you guys need to go back and watch some old Star Trek, because like their conflict is awesome, because they're like are legitimately arguing, but they're all just trying to do the same thing, and they're
Yeah.
like kind of like on the same team. They're kind of like friends, but then like they can get Bones and Spock in particular can get a little bit like snippy with each other or whatever.
Exactly. But I think characters like that, including characters like Superman, I mean, it's like their objective is always the greater good.
Yeah.
It's like when you have characters that are really trying to do the right thing, as opposed to a lot of these other characters, even like Ray. I mean, it's just like she like her whole, and I think it's a societal thing. It's all driven by her own selfishness and weakness.
Yeah.
She's all about herself. She's trying to figure out all these things about herself.
Yeah.
And you're like, get over yourself. And that's the thing that I love about a character like Superman. I mean, it's like, anyone, I mean, the dude's an alien, for goodness sake. I'm sure he's got his own, but he's actually focused on the betterment of mankind. He's actually trying to help others. And that's what makes him fun. That's what makes the character work. But that's also where a lot of villains try to play off of that, because they know that, like, well, maybe I can't get directly at Superman, but you know what? If I threaten these people, if I do X, Y, and Z. And that's one of the things I love. Like the original Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire is my favorite one. And at the end, when Spider-Man is like holding the cable car and he's on the, and the Green Goblin is attacking him, but he won't drop the car. Then like the other New Yorkers like started throwing stuff. I'm like, he's a hero.
Yeah. You're right. That is so cool. And that is like the moment. And they do that in Star Trek too. And it's a little bit hard to think of examples like like even from Star Trek, but to write but they always do it where it's a balance of morality, almost of like where both sides actually seem like they have a good point. And then how do you even settle that? Like, how can like you as the overpowered person, it's a little bit like a King Solomon kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
it's like two people coming to you with a conflict, like that you see, and you can't decide how to help them both. Like if you help one, it'll totally screw the other. If you help the other, it'll totally screw that other. How can you help them both? That's like Superman's deal.
Yes.
And yeah, so like if you can tell a Superman story, you want to include that. That's like all the best Star Trek stories are like that too.
Absolutely. But then they figure out a way in the end to save both.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's awesome. I didn't see that coming, how you're going to do that, but that's what's awesome. But a lot of stories now are just like, you know what? I'm OP and I'm in my own feelings. So this feels right. So I'm just going to do this. I'm, whatever. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight Zod and his guys in the middle of the city just because I'm pissed, and I'm going to do it. Or, I'm going to do this just because I'm in my own emotions, and like, hey, that's a good thing, right? Just, let your emotions guide you. And it's no.
Yeah.
Freaking
no.
Yeah.
Like if you apply like Ray's like philosophy, it's like you can just picture like some of these bad guys from like a Batman or Superman story, like whispering in her ear, like being like, yeah, that's good, like do that stuff,
do that,
figure out your history, it's all about you, blah blah blah. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, they're getting what they deserve. You know.
Yeah. Did you speak? This is a little pivot, but did you see the trailer for Zack Snyder's new movie? It's like the Star Wars clone, but what's it called? Rebel Moon. Did you see that?
I didn't. I saw parts of that Rebel Moon trailer, but I didn't see the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I actually didn't finish it because I started watching it, and yeah, it looks stupid, unfortunately. But you never know. Zack Snyder can make good stuff, I guess. But it looked like it was like a girl who's the chosen one, and then
Mhm.
she's a badass for no reason, and like, and that's all that it revealed. I turned it off at that point. I was like,
Yeah.
I was pretty glad that South Park came out and called that out because they go put a chick in it, make it lame and gay. Like they just called it out. Like we were like, oh man, that's like everything. And then they called
Yeah.
it out, and the stuff is still in the pipeline. So all the production houses like Disney, even they're like, crap, like we are like that, and
We are.
we
That's
got
exactly what we're doing.
we got 6 things in production that I guess we have to still release them. But so then people are like, yeah, put a chick in it, make it lame and gay. But
Absolutely. That's
yeah,
that's like that's the model.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, who is it? Shoot, there was. I heard someone say that in Hollywood they actually have like a bot that they feed scripts through. This is like not a lie, but they have like a bot like app thing that they feed scripts through to see
Mm.
whether or not it passes the Bechdel test, which is like a thing from the 80s where the Bechdel test is like for anyone in chat who doesn't know, but it's like uh do two women they have to have a conversation that's not about the plot and it's not about men is like the two things I think. And it's funny because so many movies that they don't pass the Bechdel test, but so of the greatest movies of all time, like The Godfather, Good, the Bad,
Yeah.
the Ugly, Star Wars, none of these pass the Bechdel test. The only ones that do are like sometimes rom coms, but that's what's kind of
Yeah.
funny. Even rom coms, even really good rom coms, won't pass it sometimes because like what you actually have to like make the movie worse to put in a conversation that's not about the plot and not about men or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, and you're just putting in. So I'm like, oh, that'll kind of show you where Hollywood's at right now. Like
That's
they're
pathetic.
yeah, it's like a race, kind of like a race to the bottom or something. And
Absolutely, man. This is a race to the bottom. You know,
yeah,
and like at the end of the day, they just need to keep losing money until they figure out, until someone's
yeah,
willing to make a change.
yeah. The Marvels just bombed, so I'm a little optimistic these days. But the other thing I'm kind of an accelerationist. Like I'm like I laugh when they like ruin characters now and whatever. Like they might make Bond. If they make James Bond a chick or whatever, I'd be like, do it, please. Like I don't care.
Yeah.
Actually, with Bond, there's a little asterisk is there was a while where Idris Elba might have been Bond, so they'd be making Bond black. I'm
Well,
like,
he's
I'm
cool.
okay with that because it's fucking Idris Elba.
But see, but that's you're not making him Bond because he's black. He's just cool. But like
Yeah,
it's like, oh, we're gonna make Bond a black woman. You're just like, why?
yeah,
Nobody wants to see that.
yeah.
Nobody wants to see that. So it's
I
like,
know.
who are you appealing to?
At that point, you just know it would bomb. But yeah, that's the stuff that I'm almost like laughing at because you get like burned so many times. You can't really be looking forward to like the new Bond because you just know. But supposedly, Christopher Nolan is going to direct the new Bond, maybe.
Okay.
And he's great. I love him. And he might, I don't know what he'll do with it, but I don't think he'll make it like uh, put a chick in it, make it lame and gay kind of thing. I'm pretty sure he'll avoid that. Um,
It's like it seems like Hollywood is definitely the pendulum has swung, and like just like with comics, I think it's going to start coming back the other way. Just because I mean they're losing too much money is being lost. Nobody's enjoying these things. There are people with all these agendas that are pushing these agendas, but they're not even watching this trash.
yeah. And I think it would help us if Hollywood was in a better place. And for me too, I just wouldn't mind living through an era where movies were good again because I like movies. So I wouldn't mind like,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think like Tarantino said that recently. He's like, we're in the worst era of movies ever, basically. But what's funny is he said the best is the 70s and the 90s. And he's like, the 80s weren't that good, but a lot of people love the 80s. But I kind of get what he's saying is like, if the 80s, all the ones we remember are the classics and they're great, but there's a
Yeah.
bunch that we don't remember that kind of just fell through the memory hole that weren't
Yeah.
that great. Whereas even in the 70s, it's almost like and the 90s is kind of like this, but it's like a roll of the dice. Like you can almost pick a movie by the year. And if you're doing it in the 70s, sometimes you have to like get in that mode where you're like more chill with because they're like a little slower paced.
Yeah.
But they're so good. Like every movie's good from the 70s. It was a cool era where
Yeah.
and a lot of fun storytelling stuff because it was a little bit before the super popularization of like the 3-act hero's journey structure right when Star
Right.
Wars came out. That became more and more of a thing. And we're kind of in a weird phase with that now where it's like almost like bastardized. I think some of it is somehow there was like a game of telephone and they got the wrong message where they somehow think it means chosen one. Hollywood. They're like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it has to be like he's the chosen one. She's the chosen one." I'm like, "The hero's journey is not the chosen one. That's a
No.
totally different thing." Chosen one is like an annoying cliche that has been totally played out a billion times and it kind of sucks now. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
they're struggling, man, and you're just like, man, for an industry, as old and that has made as much money, they really don't know what they're doing. I mean, they have no idea what they're doing.
yeah, yeah. And they had their own kind of like race to the bottom kind of stuff happening of whatever was with like, it's a lot of it is kind of fallout from like the woke stuff. But
Yeah,
it does feel like the pendulum is, if not quite in the process of swinging back, it's kind of right there. It's going to happen sooner or later. In the meantime, we got our own shit going on. But I did a funny stream the other day where I was like, what is like the path to get to the top of your career goals? And I was like, the number one, what would even be an example of something at the top? And you're like, well, there's like Disney from like the 70s, not like Walt Disney in the 70s, say like top of his game
uh,
or whatever, running
yeah,
like multiple movies, blah, blah, blah. That would be like an example. Mark Miller at Netflix kind of has like that, but less so. Another
yeah.
one that's kind of interesting is Seth MacFarlane, like runs
Mm,
like animation and movies and a bunch of shows at Fox. And he got
yeah.
his start is kind of interesting too, because he basically ran the gauntlet where they did he gave him his pilot out of high school or out of college. It was like a 13-minute kind of proof of concept. And they're like, okay, you can make a pilot, but you only get $50,000 to make it. And
Hmm.
so he's like, so can I hire anyone? They're like, well, you only get $50,000. So he's like, okay. So he did it all himself in a year and he lived off the 50,000 and used the money to whatever to buy the little things that he could do. So he was working like 16-hour days for I don't know if it was a year, it might have been 6 to 9 months, I think. And
Okay.
then he did like do the entire episode himself and then they did pick it up. So then from there he still worked hard his whole life, I'm sure, but uh that was like a crazy period where that was all he did. And
Yeah.
sometimes like people do that, they kind of run a gauntlet and have like this success and there's a period you can look at where they did do this crazy thing. But
Mm,
the main thing that I took away from it too is like if you look at those guys, like even those three, like Walt Disney, Mark Miller, Seth MacFarlane, it's not that different what they're doing and what we're doing actually. Like they have way bigger budgets, they're slightly different medium, like they got
yeah.
and I guess bigger audience. But the in the like crowdfunding sphere, it's like we get to write and create our own stories. Like that's kind of the biggest thing, and we're already doing it. So we're already
That's
living the
right.
dream a little bit, which is kind of cool. And it opens
Actually,
up to
really
like
cool.
the success is there. It's just fun knowing like the potential, like that it is there, that it could be like moved into other like video games, movies, animation, that kind of stuff is possible.
Right.
And yeah, I kind of want to make a little list of like who are the CG people, crowdfunding people that like when things do really start to turn, like who should like Marvel and DC or whatever like be hitting up when they
Right.
kind of get ideologically like out of the stuff, the issues that are holding them back.
Right.
And so it's been nice meeting and talking to you. I'm like, you should definitely be on that list. And then Mike Murphy is kind of a random one, but he's a great
Oh
writer at
yeah.
NCG.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, and then all the people I normally hang out with, like, but that's like, so Rini, take her for example. She already worked for Marvel and kind of hated it, so now she's like here. So I don't know if she would ever go back. It's like maybe
Right.
if the price is right, or we talked about a little of this. It's like interesting, like pros and cons to the situation. But
And it's like it's under different circumstances, and depending on what they offered her. You know what I mean? I mean,
yeah,
it has to be something that she can use to build her career.
yeah,
And
yeah,
to
yeah,
expand her influence.
yeah, yeah. So what I'm thinking is nobody's popped in yet, and my throat. I do have a sore throat, so we might cut this off at an hour.
Yep.
But then what we should do is maybe I'll do it too, but we should both hop in John Malin's chat if he's still live, and maybe send him like a $2 super chat or something. Just let people know Black Tiger's closing, because he can.
Okay.
That'll,
Cool.
you'd be surprised, but that can totally help.
Okay.
Um,
Cool. I'll do
yeah,
that.
so we'll probably do that, but let's like chat a little bit about Black Tiger to close it out then. So we did the other conversation on my channel. This is the second interview with John, and that was great. We got into it pretty in depth. It's like a lot of fun. But yeah, I want to go ahead, even if it's like new viewers, go and just kind of give us the pitch again and tell us about it.
Yeah. So Black Tiger, Hidden Dragon Volume 2. This is the conclusion to the second Black Tiger story arc. So in total, there are two complete story arcs: Legacy of Fury and Hidden Dragon. And this one is action packed. It is just packed to the gills, top to bottom, with a lot of fun martial arts action. As she finds herself, like in this image, in basically a cage of death, as she battles, of course, for her life, but she's also trying to bring. She wants to basically bring honor back to the name of her family. Her father was the prior Black Tiger, and he was uh, defamed both as the Black Tiger and he was defamed as a cop. So her actual family name, the Fong name, has been run through the mud, and the Black Tiger has as well. So a big part of her impetus here is bringing honor back to the family name, the Fong name, finding out who murdered him, and kind of the impetus behind that, and the Black Tiger. And of course, you're finding, the forces behind his murder and who's going after her, and a lot of fun martial arts in the process. So if you love action in comics, if you love superpowers, if you love just stories that move at a good clip and that keep you entertained without trying to hit you over the head with anything else, you'll enjoy this.
Yeah, yeah, and it came up. We were talking a little bit like the Black Tiger mantle. It kind of gets passed on down generations, like the Black Pirate Roberts, the Dread Pirate Roberts from
Mm-hmm.
Princess Bride. Or I don't know if JoJo's kind of like that, but like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure a little bit. It's like these like
I think I
generational
think it
mantles.
I think it is. I know my son has watched that. I haven't
Yeah,
really, but I think it does. And that's the fun thing of having a mantle that's passed down through time. It opens the gateway to telling stories of prior Black Tigers as well, which is something that I definitely want to do. And kind of one of her abilities that she's learning is the ability to see through the eyes of prior Black Tigers. So that opens up the full gateway, to
yeah,
to
that's awesome. Yeah,
seeing stuff from the past.
yeah. And part of the pitch that definitely appeals to me too is that it's just the fact that it is the martial arts genre, which is like a little bit rare. Like there isn't that many that I can think of, especially even like in crowdfunding, and like maybe there always ends up being something you can think of. Actually, you know who almost fits is Tiger Blue, and
Yeah,
this is Black Tiger. So they're both tiger and color.
in
And I do
color. I
think of
know.
them, yeah, I think of them as like that is a kind of a cool double feature. And
Yeah.
so if anyone, if you're thinking about backing them both. Consider that. Like I think that's what I'm gonna do. But yeah, and there could be a crossover eventually. We talked about that. Like, oh
Yeah, exactly. That seems like a match made in heaven right there.
yeah, but the martial arts genre itself is like a lot of like fun tropes and lore and ways that it to go about it and ways that like just even honor being like a big part of it, and all that stuff is
Absolutely.
here. And it is
Absolutely.
really cool. The other thing, a random I mentioned is like, oh, it's almost like a fighting game with the best story mode ever, and you're like, oh, that's like a great
I
way to
like
pitch it.
that. I like
Yeah,
that.
if you can think of it that way, like this almost could be like a Mortal Kombat story mode, but like, these are John's characters instead of Mortal Kombat.
Absolutely.
And that's a lot of fun. Yeah, a random thing about that is there's a Street Fighter movie anime, and I think it's called just Street Fighter 2 because there's multiple, but they're the most classic one. I think it's just called like Street Fighter 2 the movie,
Yeah.
and it's like pretty great. I'm trying to remember though. I can't even remember like the exact plot or how it ends, but it has a scene where Chung Li is in the shower and Vega comes to
Yeah.
try to assassinate her. And
Yeah.
that scene, I rewatch it like every 5 years, like not too often, but I've rewatched it like 5, 10 times now since. Well, that would make me like 50, but I watch it a lot. And it's kind of the last time I watched it was like 5 years ago. But
Yeah.
I used to watch it like every year, every 6 months, because like it's just really good like directing, like film directing. But this is a
Film. Yeah.
cartoon, and you're like, dude, this is the way they're doing this is so cool, and that fight scene is so awesome.
Yeah.
But it's cool that you can do that within like, oh, it's just a fighting game. I'm like, no, you'd be surprised, and you'd be surprised of just like, oh, two people have to fight. Like you can make that story like epic and really fun. And,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's kind of bringing that kind of a context to the fight that makes it fun.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you're like setting up all the things leading up to it, all the stakes and everything, and all the fates that might happen based on who wins, all that kind of stuff. Cool. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here, but yeah, I think a good game plan. Stick around just for a second, John. We'll talk behind the scenes for a second,
Absolutely.
but then we'll I think hop in Malin's chat and see if we can get some attention him to get some attention on this.
Very
And
cool.
then yeah, and let's just be in touch and keep streaming here and there for sure. That was a
Absolutely.
good conversation. I think I'm gonna retweet this stream, just let people know like, hey, me and John had a pretty sweet conversation about like the hypotheticals of maybe writing Superman. It was like a big part of it and what comes out of that. There was like
Yeah.
some nitty gritty good stuff that was fun to discuss.
No, I had a blast, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, Black Tiger, everyone, keep your eye out and definitely just back it. And yeah, with that, I'll end the stream now, and then we'll chat a little bit. So
Cool.